One of the most important commitments of the Agenda 2030 is to leave no one behind.
You need to be in the household to be counted, to be included.
Welcome to this seminar on better data for inclusive development. My name is Claudia Arenas. I'm the manager for the Impact and Quality Assurance Unit here in Forum Syd. And we have several guests today here to talk about better data. We have Florence Savuo from SDGs Kenya Forum. We have Joachim Stimne from Statistics Sweden and Linus Bengtsson from Flowminder Foundation. One of the most important commitments of the Agenda 2030 is to leave no one behind. And that promise means that everyone, everywhere in the world, should benefit from the forward trend that we want to achieve. It is about eradicating poverty, inequality, and discrimination all around the world. We were already off track in regards to the global goals when the pandemic hit last year. But the pandemic has now pushed us even further away from achieving the goals, and not least on eradicating poverty, of course. For the first time in 20 years, extreme poverty is on the rise. And we are expecting that over 100 million people will be pushed into poverty because of the pandemic. So even more people will be left behind. Geography is one of the factor risks when we talk about being left behind in development progress. And where you live is often determinant in how much your human rights are realized or not. And this has also been evident in the pandemic, of course. The virus has hit us all, but not in the same way everywhere, of course. And one of the interesting comparisons that I would like to bring up, interesting and also worrisome, is that of the 2.5 million people who have died until today of the pandemic, 9 out of 10 lived in rich countries, and most of them were elderly. But then on the other side of the scale, we have that at least 2.5 million people have died not of the pandemic itself, but of the measures taken to fight against the pandemic. And most of those people were young. They were living in poor countries. Many of them were women that died in childbirth, children that died in pneumonia, diarrhea, malaria, or because of malnutrition, and because the vaccination routines were not kept. So definitely we see that statistics, data, are crucial when we're seeing reality and when we're working on it to make it better, to change it. We would like to discuss a bit about how important it is to have disaggregated data that we can break down in terms of income, in terms of gender, age, ethnicity, religious affiliation, asylum status, all these different characteristics of the population around the world, and understand why it is so important to have it in order to take the right decisions and actions for development. So after this introduction, I'm going to give the word here to my guests, to our guests. I would like to start by giving the floor to you, Florence. Florence Savuo. You work as the country coordinator for SDGs Kenya Forum. You are a membership platform on the gender... Sorry. You are a membership platform on the 2030 agenda and provide space for civil society engagement with governments, citizens, the private sector, media, academia, and development partners. But you're also part of the Leave No One Behind coalition in Kenya. And I would like to ask you to give us a little bit of a context on the promise of leaving no one behind in Kenya. Who would you say are the population groups that are left behind in development progress in Kenya?
Thank you very much. This is a great opportunity to speak about the Leave No One Behind component. This is a component that is within the SDGs Kenya Forum. And so for us, we're a coalition of civil society organizations here in Kenya, working and championing SDGs from SDG 1 to SDG 17. And so for us, the Leave No One Behind component has been very, very critical. Of course, coming from a country like Kenya in the sub-Saharan Africa, where we have a lot of marginalized groups, so people who have been left behind in the Millennium Development Goals, but now within the SDGs. And some of these groups include street children, we have persons living with disability, we have orphans, we have indigenous persons, we have the older persons, also the youth, refugees, and also internally displaced persons. For us, the list, of course, is very, very long. You can imagine these groups that are within the country setting, within the geographical spaces, but also, of course, as we go into the conversation, I'll be able to maybe shed a bit of light in terms of why some of these particular groups are really being left behind within the development agenda. Yeah.
Thank you, Florence. So, as we have heard from Florence, different population groups are left behind. And in the context of pandemia, that has also meant that they have been harder stricken by the pandemia. And this, of course, makes it even more urgent that we step up when we work for sustainable development for everyone. Could we talk a little bit about then how better data can help us in this work? Linus Bengtsson, you're the executive director of the Foundation Flowminder, and your mission as foundation is to enable decision makers to access the data they need to transform the lives of vulnerable people. How do you see your work contributing to achieving the 2030 agenda and ensuring that no one is left behind?
Thanks. Thanks for the invitation. Our work focuses quite a lot on putting things on a map. It's a very nice way of visualizing and understanding and being able to use the data. We work with very detailed data on population distributions, mobility of populations, and socioeconomic characteristics. And we produce some of that data, and we crucially work with others so they can produce it. And we tailor very specific analytical outputs that can be used directly in decision making. And we make use of new types of data sources, pretty much always combined with traditional data. We work quite a lot with mobile operator data and with satellite-derived data. So how this relates to Leave No One Behind, a lot is about geographic accessibility for us and where people live. So we can make very, very detailed maps, for example, of poverty. So it's not enough to know where people live, or where poor people live to affect their poverty, but it's really a necessary step. And traditional data gives you an idea of at the first administrative area, so a country in about 10 areas. And with new methods and new data sources, you can go down to about a square kilometer in estimates of the proportion being poor. And so it gives you another tool in your decision making.
Very precise. I mean, one square kilometer is quite precise.
Yeah, there's still a lot of uncertainty. When you go to these very detailed levels, you increase your uncertainty, but still the overall information value is a lot better what we have today compared to what was available before.
How have you been working with different stakeholders now during the COVID-19 pandemia, given this information that we're producing? Are you using it in any particular way?
It's been a busy time. So about a decade ago, I came up with the idea of using mobile operator data to respond to epidemics and natural disasters, and we've been scaling that work in the foundation across many countries. So the big focus for us has been to follow population movements, how people's mobility behavior has changed and how they have stopped commuting to work, and supporting governments in DRC, in Ghana, Namibia, Haiti, Curacao, and a few other countries to understand basically how the population is changing their behavior.
Thank you, Linus. So, Joachim, you are the General Director of Statistics Sweden. And I would like to connect what Linus is saying now about that production of data with a very basic question, right? And that is, why is data and why are statistical agencies important for inclusive development and democracy?
Well, I think that statistics and the statistics agencies have a very central role in playing in the kind of state building and governance in all countries. And I think traditionally you think about statistics and official statistics and a statistics agency, their responsibility to provide statistics to describe the way things are and for decision making, and that's about it. But there are very important roles that they should be playing, and that is that also makes possible accountability. Once you have statistics on what's actually happening, because otherwise you don't have any information about the way things are, and also because I really would like to say we, because it's really kind of family of statistics agencies, have this role of making statistics accessible and understandable and meaningful for people. So I think that all of these issues are very important in this regard.
Mm-hmm. Those two key words, accountability and accessibility, are really, really important for democracy, of course. And then, of course, you are here in Sweden and working with statistics on the situation of Agenda 2030 in Sweden and globally. Could you tell us a little bit about the work with 2030 Agenda here in Sweden? And one of your latest reports focuses on the commitment of leaving no one behind here in Sweden. Could you tell us a little bit about that report, the conclusions and your reflections on it?
I think it's very exciting that we have the role of producing this report, because we have to live up to and show what kind of progress we're making towards all these 17 goals. And in order to do that, you need to have some kind of measurements of the goals and the kind of status that you're reaching on them. And we have the national responsibility for this. Of course, it's also an international issue, but when we look at the national responsibility, we really have to draw together statistics and other information from many different sources. And sometimes it's detective work. Sometimes we really have to see what kind of data is there out there. So we have put together this report now on the theme of Left No One Behind, where we are looking at inequalities, who in some sense is being left behind in the Swedish context. And I think it's very clear that there are certain groups that are left behind in many different areas. It's really the same kind of groups, and that there are interlinkages, that you are left behind, both when it comes to education, when it comes to economic status, when it comes to health status, when it comes to many other issues, that it tends to be the same kind of groups. It's the people with various kinds of handicaps, children in families that are in some sense disadvantaged, new arrivals in Sweden, some immigrant groups. None of this is really news. We sort of knew this already, but the important thing here is that we get a much richer picture of what this means for them, and also starts giving ideas and impetus to what kind of policies do we need to start thinking about in order to change this. And it's not just in one area, it's not just a question of education, even if education is important, but it is on several interlinking areas.
Exactly. And then in order to be able to act on it, we need as precise information as possible, right? What information would you say that we are missing now in the case of Sweden?
There are some gaps in the statistics, in the information, but I would say that rather that we do have lots of information, but I say that in a general sense there aren't really any very important gaps in the information, but there are certain groups that are very difficult to capture, where for quite obvious reasons or maybe I shouldn't say obvious, because it really is a challenge to us to think more about how to get information on these groups. And it's, for instance, good data on the LGBTQ community, also on the paperless people who are waiting for asylum, and those categories are very difficult to get any kind of fullness of information about.
Thank you.
Where you would also expect that there would be issues that we would like to be able to describe and give numbers on when it comes to the left one behind in the Agenda 2030 perspective.
Exactly, because we need to be able to identify the needs of the most vulnerable. So the data gaps are definitely crucial to work on. And I would like to go back to you, Florence, on this. Who would you say are the non-visible in Kenya? What is missing in the official statistics in Kenya?
Thank you very much. I think this is a very good question in terms of those missing within the official statistics. And I'd say that the groups mentioned earlier from the observation from Kenya in terms of the marginalized groups, majority of these have been missing from the official statistics. I say this because until the last census that happened in 2019, we never used to use like this Washington set of questions that could at least give more information on persons with disability. And so this meant that for very many years that official statistics did not go further in terms of disaggregation, and especially for marginalized groups like persons with disability, even just youth, street children, orphans, and so forth. And so official statistics until today has a lot of gaps because it talks about just the basic, maybe just who's the head of the household. It could be a female, a male, and then just talking about just, if it's assets, just the basic things that a lot of statistics, official census, for example, sort of look at. But when you talk about just going into details in terms of ensuring that we can tell the real stories, we can, just get to know, for example, how many households have orphans, or the magnitudes of persons with disability, of what kinds of disability and so forth. This has been lacking for so long until just the recent census that was officially released last year. And so you can imagine until today the process of disaggregation of that particular data is still ongoing, and because of COVID, it has provided a lot of challenges or stumbling blocks to this data being disaggregated. And also at national level, because of the magnitude of the resources that are required for just disaggregation of data, or for it to be well articulated, then that has not even until today happened. Yeah, and so we find ourselves with a lot of these groups in terms of maybe even the location, geographical location, the number of families, and things like, just the ages is totally missed out. And this, again, is very critical in development processes for us to be able to really showcase exactly if it's number of street children, how many street children are out here in Nairobi, or for example, the capital city, or just the other cities within Kenya. And so this many times is something that lacks, and we're not really able to, you could find just top-notch information, or within a census, there could be some, capturing of this particular information, but it's not very well the nitty-gritty of the magnitude of the problem is not dwelt into, even with other kind of national processes like not just the census alone, but other surveys that take place annually or frequent, that are more frequent. Then again, you do not find the magnitude of just investment towards providing or getting that kind of statistics.
And I would like to connect two of the challenges that you were mentioning with the work of Flowminder, of you, Linus. And that is, one is that need of identifying geographically, because the situation in the bigger cities is not necessarily the same as we have in rural areas. And then also the need of having updated information almost like in real time, because census you can't do as often. Of course not. It's not possible. And you were mentioning this work that you're doing with mobile network operators, satellites, new types of ways of filling the data gap. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how you're working with statistical agencies to use that type of technology?
Sure. Just a comment first on what Florence said, because it's very important. Thinking about the street children, for example, floating populations, mobile populations, homeless. So traditional ways of collecting data, if it's a census or if it's a household survey, you first go and you find out where all the households are, and then you take a random sample of those households. But so you need to be in a household to be counted, to be included. And there's also problems. So definitely a lot of these people who are living in the street or in small shacks maybe, or like they never get included, and it's a huge problem. With the mobile data, we are addressing another problem, but also a very important problem, which is about people to understand population movements. Some of the movements, we move all the time, right? But a lot of those movements are regular. We go to work, we go to daycare, etc. But you also have these, and those are very difficult to capture. Actually, people are not so good at remembering and reporting where they are going, and it's very expensive to ask about it. And then especially you have very big disruptions in society, so disasters, for example, where it's really not feasible it's practically impossible to go out in the street and ask people where are they going. And so traditional means are really not possible. So I started working with this 10 years ago, as I mentioned, after the earthquake in Haiti. And you've had this problem for centuries that people leave the area of a disaster to reach help. And support is coming in to the area where the disaster has happened. And really that's not necessarily where people are anymore. And so by using anonymized data from mobile operators, you can follow approximately where all the phones are and the direction with which these are moving. And you can then come up with new estimates of the distribution of the displaced population and also the population distribution of everyone. Sort of the whole distribution of people can change quite radically. And then it's the big challenge, and it's about making this data understandable and useful, and incorporate that into operational work, because this data hasn't been available before, and so that's really a key part, and that links very much into how we work with statistical agencies. Many statistical agencies are very interested in this, but it's also a new data source, and so in Ghana, for example, we work with Ghana Statistical Services, and a lot of the focus there is working with other government agencies about exactly what they want to get out of the data and how to make it useful. But that's a lot to say, like on both the technical front and the usage front.
So it is a bit also about helping to find the right questions then. What is it exactly that we want to see?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Connecting then to statistics, right, Sweden. You are also engaged in development cooperation on country level in low and middle income countries. And you're supporting, of course, that you mentioned, the other statistical agencies, the family of statistical agencies. What are your contributions in that work to the Leave No One Behind? And if there's any example that you can tell us about Kenya also.
Well, Sweden has been involved since, and Statistics Sweden, since I think the early 80s in cooperation with statistical agencies in lower middle income countries. So we have quite a long experience of this. I think one thing to focus on here is that we're moving from a direction where it's where it used to be more a question of technical support, how do you put national accounts together, and in the direction of a statistical system where you need a fuller description of society, which is built on the needs of society. And I think that especially, as has been discussed here, that issues that are often of very great importance in developing countries is the marginal groups, the informal sector, and such questions which are not very well captured in the traditional official statistics. And also the question of taking in perspectives and dialogue with other users than the government users, which traditionally are the central users in developing countries. Then you mentioned the other agencies and ministries, and they're very important, but at the same time, that is too limited a role, and that is something that we're definitely supporting. When we're thinking about the issues in Kenya, we've been working on household surveys, for instance, together with also Oxfam and UN Women, and in that way drawing in other or sort of supporting the use of the work of other sources in order to provide official statistics. The way we work is that we always have a long-term person in the office that is engaging in dialogue with the leadership of the statistical agency, but at the same time promoting issues of reaching out to and dialoguing with user groups, and also promoting statistical literacy.
Mm-hmm. And that is, I think there's a very interesting idea there, and that is that data and statistics can become the point of connection for different actors of development, to use them to ask common questions, to use them to provide answers and produce change. Can
I comment on that?
Yes,
because,
absolutely.
Because speaking of Kenya, I visited the office in Kenya, I think 2 years ago. And one of the meetings I had, I asked to bring in a number of NGOs to listen to their perspectives, and it was very clear that the availability of relevant statistics and relevant data was incredibly important to the NGOs, and I think that this is something that, in general terms, when I look at the situation, not just in low and middle income countries, but also in the Western countries, is something that there are rooms for improvement.
Absolutely, and I will take that word to Florence then. Room for improvement. How do you see, Florence, the role of civil society, both in producing better data, but also using the data for the work that you do?
Very much, and I really like the examples given by just the speaker in terms of the work they've been doing here in Kenya, and I think I've been privy to see some of that work, especially the push for the time use survey. Of course, women and girls are also part of very marginalized groups, and you'd find many times, like Kenya as a nation, we've never done a time use survey. And I know this is something that has been pushed by many civil society organizations, some of our members, including Oxfam. And so to the question about, the civil society role, I believe that one of the things is, of course, the issues of advocacy. And for us, I'll give an example in Kenya. Until today, official statistics in Kenya is only produced by the Kenya Bureau of Statistics. And so anything, any of us, if you do not collaborate with them, even if whatever kind of wonderful research you do out here that does not follow Kenya Bureau of Statistics standards and methodology, then it's not considered official. And so one of the things we've done as the SDGs Kenya Forum through our membership is to advocate for standardized guidelines to produce citizen-generated data. And so this is something that we've been at it for a few years now. And finally, Kenya is coming up with the Kenya Quality Assurance that will have in there guidelines for standardizing citizen-generated data, whereby any civil society organization or any non-governmental organization that can follow those guidelines will be able to produce official statistics. And so through advocacy we've been able to do that. We've been able to, ensure that the government can consider other non-official sources, so as to speak. Apart from that, also for us, one of our major roles is to ensure that data that is produced, be it officially, but also from quarters like civil society organizations or development partners, can influence national policies and national plans. Because for us, the budget allocation process happens due to the national plans, or it follows the national plans. And so anything that is not within the national plans then is not budgeted for, as is in many countries. And so how then do we ensure that, for example, when we identify marginalized groups, the informal sector, that is, a big driving force in Kenya, and yet is not very well documented. How then do we ensure that issues of decent work or policies on employment and so forth can be influenced by the whatever that statistics or whatever data that is coming out from either the official quarters but also non-official quarters. Again, for us as this SDGs Kenya Forum, we've come to realize that it's important for us to further visualize official statistics or data that comes out from huge reports. I say this because when we interact with communities and we have community dialogues that we do on SDGs, a lot of times the citizens tell us that, of course, they've heard of a census or the household surveys, or they always see reports that are being launched. But of course, a lot of them are not able to really read huge reports. And so then how do we just visualize if it's a woman in a certain county and she wants to go for public participation, dialogue, and she wants to really talk about access to basic amenities like water and sanitation, then how can she, have, some just visualizations that really explain to her, and maybe because of course we have people who are not, like the levels of education are very low, and so simplified reports or information is very critical for developing countries to ensure that even those that are not able to read huge reports or are not able to understand, or even just have them in English or whatever official languages that are being used, they can be able to pick out components of such reports, and they're able to utilize those for their day-to-day activities or role of social accountability as citizens. And so for us, we've been building a capacity for citizens to understand that for them, first and foremost, not to give up, not to feel that, oh wow, these reports are always in English or in Swahili, and they're huge and we're not able to read through them, and so we don't know what our role could be. So how then do we simplify such information? How do we ensure that a citizen can up and they can utilize their own social accountability needs that exist within communities? So, apart from that, also we've been capturing real life stories, stories of change, to ensure that we can tell this, or we can provide this. We can provide a voice for the voiceless within development processes by telling real stories, what's really happening. And this has been done by a number of organizations in Kenya. One of our members, for example, I like to give this example from Open Institute, where they did, awards. Award is the smallest unit, and they did award census to look around what this particular community, the opportunities they have and those that they didn't have. And one of the things that came out of that was involvement of citizens collecting data by themselves. And then later on, they realized they needed a dispensary, a hospital that was lacking. And the citizen came together, and through their local leadership, they were able to advocate for them to have a dispensary, that because the laws of Kenya, of course, have the mileage in terms of how far a dispensary should be. And so we have real life stories of change where communities have been involved through development organizations, and how this has resulted to very good or outcomes like now access to health facilities and so forth. Yeah, there's a lot that I could tell, so let me stop there.
Thank you, Florence. And you're definitely taking us already also to the next issue we wanted to discuss, and that is, it's important to have data, but it's even more important to be able to use it and apply it in the proper way. And you were giving us some very interesting examples on how we can use it to broaden the picture we have, how communities can use it to advocate, how our government, of course, can use it to produce more precise actions and responses. Could you, Linus, tell us a little bit, maybe some examples of analysis that you have done that have provided the basis for better decision and action making?
Something that I'm very excited about that is going on right now is a big project we're working on together with the DRC government and Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, and together with the GRID3 program. There are a lot of partners involved in the project, but we are improving there hasn't been a census in DRC since 1984. So it's really critical that we know where people are, how many people there are. But there is, so one part of the project that is not finished yet, is to produce very detailed population maps. So we are out in the field now counting about 500,000 people. But what we can already do and what is already done is that we can, based on satellite imagery, we know where all the buildings in DRC are. It's fantastic software now that can pick out buildings in imagery, and so we know where all the buildings are, and we can have an approximate understanding of the population distribution. And then we're using this information to place sites for vaccination. So in two provinces, in Olomami and Tanganyika, in eastern part of the country. We have developed methods to optimize the placement of vaccination sites so that you cover the whole population, ideally, but you miss a certain percentage. But we can increase the number of people covered, and we can also decrease the number of sites, so you get the cost-efficient effort. So right now it has started it's about 5 million people in these two provinces, and we're very excited that recommending these places to partners, and they will of course validate the places, and there's a groundwork as well. But the data analysis component is really important, and to actually get needles into children's arms and protect them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it seems there's a lot of things happening, of course, with statistics, how you're getting the data, how you're using it. How would you, Joachim, see that those advances and the lessons learned and experiences are being exchanged? What is happening in that area of exchanging, learning from each other about statistics?
Well, I think that the work that Linus is describing here is incredibly important, because there is a kind of intersection between data and data analysis and statistics that used to be very widely separated, and I think that they're coming together now. Especially, also, I like it when you talk about the geographic issues. I almost became a geographer once, and this is exactly the kind of thing that you want to be doing. So it's different disciplines that are coming together here. But I think that once again, I think that it's very important that we continue to have a very strong user dialogue. I mean, it goes in two directions here. Sort of what kind of data do you bring in, and that's the whole the data, how you get the data basically, and then what you put out in the other end. And of course, those things there has to be an interaction between those two, and for this you need a strong dialogue at the user end also.
Of course, and that brings us to another topic, because there's advance. It is important to have data, to have statistics, but there's challenges, right? What would you say, and this is a bit open to the three of you, what would you say are the main challenges for us in the world, different stakeholders, to use data and statistics better for leaving no one behind? And whoever wants to start.
I can throw one out, but there's so many.
Yes.
But what we call capacity. So just for decision makers, policy makers, being used to dealing with data, and but also the data being presented in the right way to be adjusted to the decisions that will actually be taken. There has been so much good data. I talk a lot about improvements in data all the time, but we need to recognize that there's been a lot of data in low and middle income countries around for many, many years through fantastic, like the DHS program, for example. And it's very underutilized. And well, there's a lot to say about this, but investments in data literacy and data, I can throw that in as a first.
Data literacy, key. And it's also very much related to what Florence was saying about capacity and about language. Joachim, do you want to add something?
No, well, I would say that there are three things that you really need to think about when it comes to the development of statistics. I like to talk about statistics and not just about data, because it's also a question of the kind of quality of the data, how you use the data, but it's really a question of the data literacy that you mentioned. I think that is key, but also the relevance of the statistics that you produce, and the accessibility to the data and the statistics. And I think that all those three really are areas where you have to work very focused on when you are. And also when you're building statistical systems, because you really need a systems approach to this, and when this becomes a key part of the governance of a country.
Systems, that's a very important point, absolutely. Florence, do you want to add something to this question about challenges?
Yes. Thank you. And I think some very relevant comments have been made. And so for me, I'd say from country level, one of the biggest challenge is, of course, the frequency of production of official data or statistics, and then again availability and access. And so sometimes you find that there's information or there's statistics or reports or data that are produced, but accessing those to the normal or to the citizen, for us, access sometimes is a challenge. Even with the access to information bill, we find that access in this case, where maybe from an official perspective, then this is loaded into our website, or their physical copies. And of course, that means that a lot of people are not able to access websites, or they're not able to access physical location where some of these critical reports could be. Secondly, for us, is the issue of political goodwill. Of course, this talks about issues of, just even the local domestic resourcing in terms of adequate resourcing, the issues of statistics and data. And so you find for us, census, of course, will be 10 years. The household surveys are dependent on resourcing at any given financial year. And so many times there are a lot of competing priorities at country level that you'd find that sometimes statistics and data will take maybe a backseat, and given the situations that happen at country level in sub-Saharan African countries like Kenya and among others, you find that this is sometimes not a huge priority, and especially in terms of financing. And of course, if that is not well financed, and these issues of data and statistics require, the whole country coverage, or the region, all the regions coverage, and so that becomes a huge hindrance in having frequent and reliable, timely statistics and so forth. And so again, also, and this is a challenge, especially among maybe civil society organizations. There is lack of, the capacity of the resource persons. You find a lot of civil society organizations, for example, do not maybe have the resources to employ a full-time, could be it a monitoring person or a data analyst, unless maybe this is their specialty. And so I say this because we, as the SDG Kenya Forum, coordinate SDG reporting for the civil society in Kenya. And many times our members, a lot of our members have challenges just producing those reports. And it's because how the system is set at an organizational level, and whereby they just have the normal reports, the civil society reports, the project reports. But when it comes to SDG indicator targets reporting, then many times that's not done from an organizational level. And so organizations that are not able to do that, then even when it comes to SDG reporting, or even just producing their own reports on other matters, then it becomes a huge challenge. Or maybe they have to outsource, or always get maybe a consultant, and as you all know, this is not very reliable, especially for civil society organizations. And so these are some of the challenges that we are experiencing. That, and I think I said the rest about Citizen, how information that is well packaged for citizens, for them to be able to quickly pick in local languages, but also information that does not require them to really have an in-depth read, but to understand or analyze a situation and have the right content to express themselves. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Florence. With this points that the three of you have brought up about challenges, I'm just imagining how we all can make the map that we have about low and middle income countries more precise, so that we can do better work. Absolutely interesting. And then I was also thinking, how can we, and we are different stakeholders here, quite, government agencies, research foundations, civil society, how can we collaborate? How can we work together better to produce this statistics, the data, the dialogue, the decision making, how to get this closer to the people, as all of you have mentioned, it is important to get closer to the people. Do you have some words of wisdom to share and on how we could collaborate better?
Well, I think I've mentioned the question of dialogue before, and I think that it's very important to engage in this dialogue. And it's not so much for sort of to be nice to the civil society organizations, but really because they have a very different perspective, different competencies and different abilities to see what kind of needs there are, and also to be able to give input on data and on methods and on the relevance of what is going on. And I think that is invaluable when it comes to low and middle income countries, especially since it's very much a question of capturing groups, persons, activities, societal challenges that don't really look exactly the same when you're in a poorer country as when you're in a richer country. And I think that this is key to developing statistics. I think also it's important for the civil society organizations to be able to trust the statistics agencies. And one very basic precondition for a statistics agency is that it is supposed to be, and in most places by law, it also is independent, because it's supposed to be impossible for the politicians to come in and have a view on what kind of data, what kind of statistics you should produce, because very often statistics don't look that nice, and especially, I mean, even if you're a completely honest, well-intentioned politician and you do everything that's right, and then the numbers go in the wrong direction, it's sort of it becomes easy to shoot the messenger. But I think that it's important for the statistics agencies to maintain their independence and the impartiality, and I think there has to be a kind of mutual trust here between the civil society and the agencies, that this is sort of a specific part of government and the governance which is supposed to, and I think in most cases actually is truly sort of independent.
Thank you, Joachim. Florence, did you want to give us some words?
Yes, thank you. I think better collaborations, one is for us to first, do away with duplication. There's a lot of duplication of efforts that exist when a lot of, for example, civil society organizations are involved in processes that the National Bureau of Statistics, could benefit from. many times at country level, you find there's no synergies that exist, or maybe very limited synergies that exist. And so I think the former speaker talked about how then do we, find mutual trust or ways of working. And so that, of course, calls for more investment. There's need for more investment, especially at country level, to ensure that when we come up with these, synergized platforms, like for example, in Kenya, we are pushing for a data users and producers forum that brings together the state and non-state actors to sort of just understand, to have a relationship where we can understand what's going on and, what needs to be done jointly and how we can feed into, all of us as key stakeholders. Then how do we ensure that there are more investments that happen, at all levels and all stakeholders are critically also involved. They can spell out their roles, and that can be very well articulated, because I think that lacks in many countries, whereby there's no deliberate, just coming together and synergizing to ensure that there could be a better way of working, there could be better relationships, there could be, a better way to understand who does what and who's, better placed and who has a heart, for example, of leave no one behind. You'd find a lot of non-state actors, maybe that's what they're really keen about. And then how do we get that platform, or how do we utilize, that kind of platform? And then lastly, also, I believe the whole concept behind the citizen-generated data is very, very critical, and especially if we continuously, of course, impact, just the skills or the knowledge that is required, to ensure, especially for developing countries, to ensure that, more and more data, is being collected. And for me, that really is what is at the heart of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. We can really have development processes that are, are well informed, or rely on credible data information. If we could tell, how many artisan the local artisan, the informal settlement, how many people are in there, how many street children or families are out here, how many, the issues of, increased levels of poverty and so forth. And so we have that particular opportunity within the citizen-generated data, because, of course, we've seen that even within the National Bureau of Statistics, they have, of course, already existing challenges that can be met by processes like citizen-generated data. How then do we collaborate and ensure that these are not parallel processes, but they complement each other? Thank you.
Absolutely. We need to complement each other. Key word there. So key information. We need information to be better in this work that we do with the SDGs. Linus, do you want to share some closing words?
So much on the collaboration, just something to add there is really time and stability. So we have a lot of these short-term projects, and they don't really allow for a change in the system, and they're driving kind of stressed outcomes, and people need fundamentally time together to achieve things and set that trust that is needed.
Absolutely. And as you see, that word has been common with the three of you: trust, synergies, collaboration, in order, I would say, at the end, to have partnerships around development, and in this case, partnerships that are departing from facts, from data that we then can use to provide actions for development, to leave no one behind. Well, thank you, everyone, for this participation. It was really interesting to talk to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.